Good morning, Year 4. I hope you're all well today. This week we've been looking at the text The Little Wooden Horse and justifying our thinking about characters and information we find in this text. So when we finished yesterday, Elizabeth and Tom had escaped the orphanage and were now living on the streets. Let's see today what information we can find out about the events of this time and how our characters worked and survived. In the bright sunshine of a spring morning, Elizabeth gently guided Tom through the streets. Neither of them had eaten for days and Tom was sick. Elizabeth knew she had to find food for him. They stopped at the corner of a dark lane and Elizabeth said, "Wait here, Tom, and don't follow me." She crept towards the bustle of carriages and people at the far end of the lane, where there was a bakery on the corner. I wonder if you can think about Elizabeth and Tom's situation and perhaps using some of your own background knowledge of what was happening in England, make a prediction about what might happen next. So Tom is sick, he hasn't eaten for days, so he's hungry. Elizabeth knows she has to find him food because she's always protecting him. She sees a bakery. What might happen next? Let's see how you went with your prediction. When everyone was distracted by a carriage thundering by, Elizabeth dashed out of the lane. She grabbed a loaf of bread from the baker's bench as she ran past. "Elizabeth, Elizabeth!" came an urgent cry from behind her. She knew it was Tom and tried to turn in her stride to see why he was there. In turning, her foot caught the side of a stall and she went crashing to the ground. The little wooden horse she treasured spilled out of her pocket and was gone. "Where's Tom?" she thought, as rough hands grabbed her shoulders and pinned her down. So I'm going to explain my thinking and my understanding, and I'm going to justify using evidence from the text. So I think Elizabeth tried to steal bread from the bakery because she wanted to give Tom food. She knew he was starving and she knew he was sick. But as she tried to grab the bread, she was caught. And I think that she was caught because when I read rough hands grabbed her shoulders, suggests to me that somebody was trying to hold on to her very tightly and pinned her down. Pinned her down means to force her down to the ground and hold her on the ground so that she cannot move. How was your prediction? Were you right? Is this what you were expecting to happen to Elizabeth? Elizabeth awoke in the dark, rubbed her eyes, then felt dampness around her head on the cold wooden floor. For an instant, she thought she was back at the orphanage. She sat up and the putrid smell and steel bars told her where she really was. The convicts called it the Dunkirk Hulk, a huge old warship that was full of holes, permanently anchored in Portsmouth Harbour. As the prisons around London became overcrowded, prisoners were sent to places like this. The old ships were infested with rats, cockroaches, mould and lice. Though many of the convicts were women and children, the guards were brutal and everyone lived in constant fear. So let's just unpack some of the language so that we can make sure that we understand the text and what's happening. If we look at the word putrid here, it means really unpleasant, really rotten. So it smelt really badly on board those ships. The name of the ship is the Dunkirk Hulk, and it was an old warship. Now it says that it was permanently anchored. That means that it didn't go out to sea, it just sat off land. So it just sat there and they loaded, you can see the images down here, prisoners being taken out to the ships because the ships themselves didn't move. And these hulks were used because we can see that the prisons in England or in London had become very overcrowded. and they had to do something with all the prisoners, so they sent them out to spend time on these ships. The word here, infested, not a very nice word at all, and it means that something's there in really large quantities or large amounts. So there were lots of rats, lots of cockroaches, lots of mold, lots of lice. The other thing is, when I look at the word brutal about the way the guards treated the convicts on board the Hulk, it's a really strong word. It's more than violent, it's really harsh, it's savage, it's cruel. So with all of this information, if I'm going to justify my thinking using all of that evidence, I believe these Hulks were a horrible place for any human being, but particularly horrible for a child. I think that poor Elizabeth, she'd already lived a really hard life. She grew up in an orphanage, losing her parents when she was just a baby. She was forced to be a slave in a cotton mill, risking her life daily. And now here she is, imprisoned on a Hulk. To survive, she has to be really strong. She has to be really clever. She has to be pretty resilient. So your reading task today is roll on the wall. If you're in my reading group, you'll know what this is. We've done this before. So you draw an outline of a character. On the inside of the character, you write everything that you know about the character so far. So that what they might look like, what kind of personality they have, things they like, things they dislike, maybe something that they've said, some quotes that you can take directly from the text, maybe some things that they're thinking about. Around the outside of the person, you write everything else you know about the text. So where it's set, you might draw a picture of the Hulk, or you might describe the Hulk, you might describe the orphanage. You can include ideas about the plot, so what's happening in the text, some of the complications that Elizabeth had dealt with. Now, we want you to be really creative with this task. You can copy the image of the person from the health slide on page 44, and you could work on that. You might want to create a poster at home and then upload your image to your slide if you've got some poster paper. You could even take your roll on the wall outside if you've got some chalk and draw a picture of Elizabeth on your driveway and complete your task there. Don't forget to upload the photo so that we can see all the great work that you're doing. Enjoy your day, Year 4.